The massive arena stretched across 3 kilometers of reinforced titanium and energy shields, its curved walls rising like the ribs of some ancient beast. Above, thousands of alien spectators filled the viewing platforms, their various forms creating a living tapestry of colors, shapes, and sounds that would have overwhelmed most species. The air hummed with anticipation and the barely contained energy of creatures who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness this moment. Ambassador Zektai adjusted his ceremonial robes with 4 of his 6 arms while his compound eyes tracked the movement below. As the Galactic Council's official representative, he had overseen many diplomatic ceremonies, but none quite like this. The weight of his responsibility pressed down on his exoskeleton like the gravity of a neutron star. Today would either mark the beginning of a new alliance or the end of everything the Council had worked to build. "The humans are late," hissed Chancellor Vexera from beside him. Her serpentine form coiled and uncoiled with nervous energy, scales shifting from deep blue to worried purple. Perhaps they have reconsidered this foolish gesture. Zektai's mandibles clicked in what his species considered a gesture of uncertainty. "The human ambassador assured us they would arrive precisely at the appointed time. Their species appears to place great value on punctuality." Below them, the arena floor gleamed under the artificial suns that provided illumination. At the center, a massive crystalline cage held the galaxy's most feared creature. Even from their elevated position, the spectators could feel the waves of primal terror radiating from the void dragon. The beast was ancient beyond measure, its black scales seeming to absorb light itself. When it moved, reality seemed to bend around its massive form, and whispers of madness touched the minds of those who looked too long into its burning red eyes. The void dragon had been discovered 3 centuries ago during the expansion into the Outer Rim. An entire fleet of the galaxy's finest warriors had been required to capture it, and, even then, the casualties had been staggering. 12 species had declared the creature too dangerous to exist, but the Council had voted to preserve it as a symbol of the galaxy's darkest mysteries. Since then, it had been displayed at only the most significant ceremonies, always safely contained, always treated with the utmost caution. "I still cannot comprehend why the humans requested this particular trial," muttered General Craxton, his massive form bristling with the ceremonial spikes of his warrior caste. Any other test of courage would have sufficed for their admission to the Council. They could have faced the plasma storms of Kepler 7, or navigated the maze of Titan's labyrinth. Why choose certain death? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every species in the galaxy knew the legend of the Void Dragon. Those who came too close to its prison fell into madness. Those who touched its cage were consumed by nightmares that drove them to suicide. The creature's very presence was antithetical to life, order, and sanity. It represented chaos given form, destruction made manifest. Yet the humans had specifically requested this trial when they petitioned for membership in the Galactic Council. When asked to choose their test of worthiness, they had ignored safer options and pointed directly to the most dangerous creature in known space. The Council had tried to dissuade them, offering alternatives that would still demonstrate courage without guaranteeing death, but the humans had been insistent. "Look," whispered someone from the crowd. "They approach." A murmur rippled through the thousands of spectators as a small procession entered the arena through the main gates. The human delegation was tiny compared to most species' ceremonial parties, just 5 individuals walking across the vast expanse of the arena floor. They wore simple clothing, nothing like the elaborate armor or protective gear that other species would have donned for such an occasion. Leading the group was a middle-aged human female with graying hair tied back in a practical style. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked with quiet confidence, her dark eyes scanning the arena with professional interest rather than fear. Beside her walked Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's xenobiologist, his recording equipment capturing every detail of their historic moment. 2 security personnel flanked them, their hands resting casually on weapons that everyone knew would be useless against their intended opponent. But it was the 5th member of their group that caused the alien spectators to fall into stunned silence. Walking hand in hand with Ambassador Chen was a human child, no more than 8 standard years old. The little girl had blonde hair that caught the artificial sunlight and bright blue eyes that looked around the arena with wonder rather than fear. She wore a simple dress decorated with colorful flowers, and, in her free hand, she carried a small stuffed animal that appeared to be some sort of earth creature. "Madness," breathed Chancellor Vexera, her scales now shifting to the deep red of alarm. "They have brought a youngling to face the Void Dragon. This goes beyond courage into the realm of insanity." The whispers of the crowd grew louder, echoing off the arena walls in dozens of different languages and forms of communication. Some species communicated through color changes, others through pheromone releases, and still others through subsonic vibrations. The result was a cacophony of confusion and growing horror as the implications of what they were witnessing began to sink in. "Surely this is some mistake," General Crackston's voice carried the desperate hope of someone trying to deny an obvious truth. "No species would risk their young in such a manner. Perhaps the child is here merely to observe?" But, even as he spoke, the human delegation approached the designated starting point, just 50 meters from the Void Dragon's cage. The creature within had noticed their arrival and was beginning to stir, its massive head lifting to focus burning red eyes on the approaching figures. The temperature in the arena seemed to drop several degrees, and more than one spectator felt the touch of primal fear despite the energy shields that separated them from the monster below. Ambassador Chen knelt beside the child, speaking to her in quiet tones that the arena's sensors couldn't quite pick up. Whatever she said seemed to delight the little girl, who nodded enthusiastically and hugged her stuffed animal closer. Then, to the horror of every alien watching, the ambassador stood up and stepped back, leaving the child to face the Void Dragon alone. "Stop this!" The cry came from Section 7, where the Telani delegation sat. Their leader, High Priestess Yelena, rose from her seat on unsteady legs. "This is a violation of every civilized code. We cannot allow a child to face such danger." Similar protests erupted throughout the arena. The hegemony representatives were frantically consulting their legal databases, searching for precedents that might halt the ceremony. The crystalline chorus sang discordant notes of distress that made the air itself vibrate with tension. Even the normally stoic Titanium Brotherhood were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, their mechanical forms clicking and whirring with agitation. But Ambassador Zektai raised 4 of his arms for silence, his voice carrying across the arena through the public address system. "The humans have requested this trial in accordance with the ancient laws of membership. Their chosen representative must face the challenge they themselves selected. We cannot interfere unless they specifically request our aid." The child, seemingly oblivious to the chaos surrounding her, had begun walking toward the Void Dragon's cage. Her small feet made barely any sound on the arena floor, and she maintained the same wonder-filled expression that had marked her entrance. Every step took her closer to a creature that had driven seasoned warriors to madness with a single glance. The Void Dragon was now fully alert, its massive form pressing against the energy barriers of its cage. Each breath from the creature sent ripples through reality itself, and several of the more psychically sensitive species in the audience began to experience nausea and disorientation. The beast's eyes never left the approaching child, and something that might have been hunger flickered in their burning depths. "The child shows no fear," Dr. Hexala observed from the scientific delegations section. As the galaxy's leading expert on xenopsychology, her analysis carried weight among the assembled dignitaries. "This is unprecedented. Every species we have studied shows instinctive fear responses when confronted with the Void Dragon's presence. Yet her bio readings indicate nothing but curiosity and excitement." The observation sent another ripple of unease through the crowd. Fear was supposed to be universal, a basic survival mechanism that had evolved independently in countless species across the galaxy. The fact that a human child showed no such response was deeply unsettling to minds that had spent lifetimes studying the common threads that bound all sentient life together. 20 meters from the cage now, and the child paused to look up at the Void Dragon with the kind of direct, unblinking stare that children everywhere seem to master instinctively. The creature's massive head tilted slightly, as if puzzled by this tiny being who dared to meet its gaze without flinching. For a moment, predator and child regarded each other across a gulf of size, age, and species that should have made communication impossible. Then, the child smiled, a bright, innocent expression that seemed to light up the arena, and took another step forward. "By the 7 moons," whispered someone in the crowd. "She's actually approaching it." The child was now close enough to touch the energy barrier that contained the Void Dragon. The creature's massive head was level with her own, separated by only the thickness of the containment field. Its burning eyes were larger than her entire head, and its breath fogged the energy barrier with each exhalation. This close, the child should have been overwhelmed by the psychic pressure that radiated from the ancient beast. Instead, she reached into a pocket of her dress and pulled out something small. The arena's sensors focused on the object, magnifying the image for the benefit of the spectators. It was a simple flower, a daisy from Earth, with white petals and a yellow center. The child held it up to show the Void Dragon, her expression proud and happy, as if she were sharing a treasure with a friend. The void dragon stared at the flower for a long moment, then, slowly, impossibly, its massive head moved closer to the energy barrier. The creature that had terrified the galaxy for centuries was studying a simple flower with what could only be described as curiosity. And then, something happened that would be remembered in the annals of galactic history for millennia to come. The child, still smiling her innocent smile, leaned forward and pressed her lips to the energy barrier in a gentle kiss. The void dragon's burning eyes widened, and, for the first time in recorded history, the creature that embodied chaos and destruction made a sound that wasn't a roar of rage or a howl of hunger. It was a soft, almost musical note, questioning, vulnerable, and utterly unlike anything it had ever produced before. The energy barrier flickered and died. 10,000 alien voices cried out in terror as the containment field collapsed, leaving nothing between the most dangerous creature in the galaxy and a small human child who continued to smile up at it with perfect trust. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the arena, and security forces started mobilizing for what they were certain would be a catastrophic disaster. But the void dragon didn't attack. Instead, it lowered its massive head until it was almost touching the child, who reached up with one small hand to gently stroke the creature's black scales. The gesture was so tender, so natural, that it took several moments for the full implications to register with the watching crowd. The child was petting the galaxy's most feared monster, and the monster was letting her. Impossible, breathed High Priestess Yelena, her voice barely audible over the continued alarms. This cannot be real. The void dragon doesn't, it can't. But the evidence was there for all to see. The creature that had been the stuff of nightmares for 3 centuries was pressing its great head against the child's hand like an oversized pet seeking affection. Its burning eyes had dimmed to a warm glow, and the psychic pressure that normally radiated from its presence had transformed into something that felt almost like contentment. The child giggled, a sound of pure joy that carried clearly across the now silent arena, and wrapped her small arms around as much of the void dragon's head as she could manage in an enthusiastic hug. The creature's eyes closed, and a rumbling sound emerged from its throat that was unmistakably a purr. Ambassador Chen, who had been watching the entire exchange with calm professional interest, finally stepped forward. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of the Galactic Council," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "I believe our trial of worthiness has been completed successfully. Humanity respectfully requests acceptance into your ranks, with the understanding that we bring our own unique perspective to the challenges facing our shared galaxy." The arena remained locked in stunned silence for several more moments before Ambassador Zektai managed to find his voice. The trial has indeed been completed," he announced, though uncertainty colored every word. "The human representative has faced the void dragon and survived. According to the ancient laws, humanity has earned the right to join the Galactic Council." But, even as he spoke the ceremonial words, Zektai knew that everything had changed. The humans hadn't simply survived an encounter with the galaxy's most dangerous creature, they had somehow transformed it. The implications of what they had just witnessed would ripple through galactic civilization for generations to come. The child, still hugging the now docile void dragon, looked up at the thousands of alien spectators with her bright blue eyes and waved cheerfully, as if she had just performed a simple trick rather than accomplished the impossible. Her innocence was absolute, her trust complete, and her courage beyond measure. And, in that moment, every being in the arena realized they were looking at something that would change their understanding of what it meant to be human, to be brave, and to face the darkness with nothing but love in your heart. The emergency medical teams arrived within minutes, their equipment scanners sweeping frantically over both the child and the void dragon, searching for signs of psychic contamination or physical harm. Dr. Yilseth, the Council's chief xenobiologist, led the team with obvious reluctance, his tentacled form staying as far from the dragon as possible while still performing his duties. "All readings are normal," he reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "The child shows no signs of mental trauma, psychic damage, or physical injury. Her brain patterns indicate happiness and excitement, nothing more." He paused, checking his instruments again. "The void dragon's biosignatures have also changed dramatically. The chaotic energy patterns we've monitored for centuries have stabilized into something resembling contentment." The child, whose name they had learned was Emma Patterson, continued to pet the massive creature with the unconscious ease of someone feeding ducks in a park. The void dragon had settled into a lying position, making itself more accessible to her small hands. Occasionally it would make that strange purring sound, a noise that seemed to physically vibrate through the arena floor. Ambassador Chen watched the medical teams work with patient professionalism, But Dr. Webb was frantically taking readings with every instrument at his disposal. His excitement was barely contained as he discovered measurement after measurement that defied everything they knew about the universe. "Sarah, you need to see this," Webb whispered urgently to the ambassador. "The quantum resonance readings around Emma are unlike anything in our databases. It's as if her presence is actively stabilizing the dragon's chaotic energy matrix." "But that's impossible, humans don't have psychic abilities." From the viewing stands, the alien dignitaries were engaged in heated discussions that carried clearly across the arena. The universal translator systems were working overtime to manage dozens of simultaneous conversations, creating a babel of confusion and speculation. "The implications are staggering," General Craxton was saying to his military advisors. "If humans can somehow neutralize the galaxy's most dangerous predator through simple physical contact, what does that mean for our understanding of warfare? Of defense? Of the very nature of threat assessment?" Chancellor Vexera had coiled herself into a tight spiral of anxiety, her scales shifting through every color in the spectrum of distress. "This changes everything. Every protocol, every safety measure, every assumption we've built our civilization upon. How do we categorize a species that treats our greatest nightmare as a pet?" High Priestess Yelena was consulting frantically with her theological advisors, trying to reconcile what she had witnessed with 3,000 years of religious doctrine. "The sacred texts speak of harmony between predator and prey as a sign of the universe's end times," she murmured. "But they also speak of it as the beginning of a new age. Which prophecy are we witnessing?" Dr. Hexala had left her seat entirely and was now standing at the viewing platform's edge, her multiple eyes focused intensely on the scene below. As the galaxy's premier xenopsychologist, she was perhaps the only being present who might begin to understand what they were witnessing. "Colleagues," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of one of the galaxy's most respected scientists. "I believe we are observing a phenomenon that our current scientific frameworks cannot adequately explain. The human child is not simply unafraid of the void dragon, she appears to be actively communicating with it on some level we cannot detect or measure." The statement sent ripples of unease through the assembled crowd. Communication with the void dragon had been attempted by the galaxy's finest telepaths, linguists, and xenobiologists for 3 centuries. Every attempt had ended in madness, death, or both. Yet here was a human child accomplishing what the combined efforts of 1,000 species had failed to achieve. Emma had discovered that the void dragon enjoyed having the area behind its massive ears scratched, and was now standing on her tiptoes to reach the spot that made the creature's eyes half close in obvious pleasure. Her stuffed animal, which they had learned was called a teddy bear, sat nearby, apparently serving as a faithful guardian for the impromptu play session. "Mr. Dragon has such pretty scales," Emma said to no one in particular, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed arena. "They're like the night sky back home, all dark and sparkly. Mama says the night sky is full of friends we haven't met yet." The casual way she addressed the creature, as if it were simply another playmate rather than a cosmic horror, sent chills through every alien present. But what disturbed them more was the void dragon's response. The creature turned its massive head to look at Emma when she spoke, and its burning eyes seemed to focus on her with something approaching understanding. Ambassador Zektai was fielding urgent communications from council members across the galaxy. His ceremonial robes were becoming disheveled as he tried to manage 6 different conversations simultaneously while keeping his primary attention on the unprecedented events unfolding below. "Yes, Counselor Prime, I understand your concerns," he said into one communication device while gesturing frantically at his aides. "No, we cannot simply extract the child from the situation. The moment appears to be stable. Any intervention might disrupt whatever process is occurring." Another device chimed urgently. "Director Quantum, the energy readings are indeed off any known scales. Our best scientists are reviewing the data now, but preliminary analysis suggests that the child's presence is having a stabilizing effect on local spacetime. I repeat, spacetime itself appears to be more stable in her immediate vicinity." The crystalline chorus, beings of living mineral who communicated through harmonic resonance, had begun producing a complex musical pattern that translated roughly to unprecedented paradigm shift requiring complete theoretical restructuring. Their analysis was known to be among the most precise in the galaxy, and their obvious confusion was deeply unsettling to the other species present. Meanwhile, the security forces were struggling with protocols that had never anticipated the current situation. Captain Thexmar, head of Arena Security, was reviewing emergency procedures with increasing frustration. "Sir," one of his subordinates reported, "we have containment breach protocols for hostile situations, evacuation procedures for catastrophic failures, and emergency response plans for everything from terrorist attacks to natural disasters. But we have no protocols for dangerous creature becomes friendly with alien child. What are our orders?" Captain Thexmar looked down at the scene below, where Emma was now showing the void dragon her teddy bear, holding it up for the creature's inspection. The dragon examined the toy with what could only be described as polite interest, careful not to damage it with its massive claws. "Maintain current positions," he decided finally. "Full sensor monitoring, medical teams on standby, but no direct intervention unless specifically requested. And someone find me a xenopsychologist who specializes in impossible situations, because I'm pretty sure we're going to need one." Dr. Webb had managed to get close enough to take detailed readings of the interaction between Emma and the void dragon. His excitement was infectious as he called his findings to Ambassador Chen. "The energy patterns are incredible, Sarah. The dragon's chaotic field signature is being modulated by Emma's bioelectric field, but she's generating patterns that shouldn't be possible for a human nervous system. It's as if she's instinctively speaking a language that we don't even know exists." Emma had moved on to playing a simple clapping game, the kind that children throughout the galaxy used to pass time. But, instead of clapping with another child, she was gently tapping her small hands against the void dragon's enormous claws. The creature was participating, carefully timing its movements to match her rhythm, its massive talons moving with delicate precision to avoid harming her. 1, 2, 3, 4, Emma counted, her voice bright with laughter. "Your turn, Mr. Dragon." The void dragon responded with a series of gentle taps against the arena floor, matching her rhythm perfectly. The sound echoed through the arena like distant thunder, but there was something almost musical about the pattern. Several of the more scientifically minded observers realized that the creature was counting, demonstrating a level of intelligence and understanding that had never been suspected. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Hexala. "The void dragon is engaging in collaborative play behavior. This requires theory of mind, pattern recognition, social cooperation, and temporal sequencing. We're not looking at a mindless predator. We're looking at a sophisticated intelligence that has been trapped in isolation for 3 centuries. The realization sent shockwaves through the scientific community present. If the void dragon was indeed intelligent rather than simply a force of chaos, then everything they thought they knew about the creature would need to be reconsidered. The ethical implications alone were staggering." Emma had grown tired of the clapping game and was now exploring the dragon's scales with the detailed interest that children brought to everything new. She traced patterns with her finger, apparently delighted by the way the scales seemed to shimmer and shift in response to her touch. "You're lonely, aren't you?" she said softly, her words carrying in the silence. "It's okay. I get lonely sometimes too, especially when we travel to new places. But Mama says that lonely just means you haven't found your friends yet." The void dragon's response was immediate and unmistakable. The creature's great head lowered until it was resting gently against Emma's small form, and a sound emerged from its throat that could only be described as a sigh of profound sadness and relief. Several of the more empathic species in the audience felt the emotion as a physical sensation, a wave of longing and gratitude that had been building for centuries. "Great cosmic forces," whispered High Priestess Yelena. "The creature has been in emotional pain all this time. We thought we were containing a monster, but we were actually imprisoning a sentient being." The theological implications were staggering. If the void dragon was not the chaotic force of destruction they had believed, but rather a misunderstood intelligence driven to madness by centuries of isolation, then the entire moral foundation of the Council's actions would need to be examined. Ambassador Chen chose this moment to address the assembled dignitaries, her voice carrying the calm authority of a trained diplomat. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began, "I believe we are witnessing something that will fundamentally change our understanding of intelligence, communication, and the nature of fear itself." She gestured toward Emma, who had settled into a comfortable position against the void dragon's side and appeared to be telling it a story about her home on Earth. The creature listened with obvious attention, its burning eyes focused on her face with an intensity that would have been terrifying if it hadn't been so clearly benevolent. "My people have a saying," Shin continued. "It takes a child to ask the questions that adults are afraid to voice." Emma didn't approach the void dragon with our preconceptions about danger and chaos. She approached it with curiosity, compassion, and the assumption that understanding was possible. The arena fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Every species present had approached the void dragon with fear, treating it as a threat to be contained rather than a being to be understood. They had projected their own assumptions onto the creature, never considering that its apparent hostility might be a response to their hostility. Emma's story had reached its conclusion, something about a brave knight who discovered that the scary dragon was actually just protecting its garden of flowers, and she was now humming a simple melody while absently stroking the dragon's scales. The creature had begun to hum along, its massive vocal cords creating harmonics that turned the child's simple tune into something hauntingly beautiful. The resonance patterns are incredible, Dr. Webb reported to his recording devices. They're creating a harmonic frequency that's actually healing the quantum distortions in local spacetime. The arena's structural integrity has improved by 12% just from their singing together. But, perhaps the most remarkable thing was how normal it all seemed. Emma treated her interaction with the galaxy's most feared creature as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She showed no awareness of the thousands of aliens watching her with a mixture of awe and terror. To her, this was simply a new friend who happened to be very large and very lonely. The Void Dragon, for its part, seemed to have forgotten entirely about the watching crowd. Its attention was completely focused on the small human who had shown it the first genuine kindness it had experienced in centuries. When Emma yawned and rubbed her eyes, the excitement of the day finally catching up with her, the creature carefully adjusted its position to provide her with a more comfortable place to rest. "She's falling asleep," someone whispered from the crowd, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the impossible peace that had settled over the arena. And, indeed, Emma's eyes were growing heavy as she nestled against the Void Dragon's warm side. Her teddy bear was tucked securely in her arms, and her breathing was beginning to slow into the rhythm of approaching sleep. The dragon watched over her with the protective attention of a guardian, its massive form curled around her in a gesture of instinctive protection. The sight of the galaxy's most dangerous predator serving as a pillow for a sleeping human child was perhaps the most surreal image any of the observers would ever witness. Yet there was something profoundly right about it, as if this was how things were always meant to be. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened while Emma slept peacefully against the Void Dragon's side. Representatives from across the galaxy transmitted their presence via quantum entanglement, their holographic forms filling the arena's upper galleries. The debate that followed would be remembered as one of the most significant in galactic history. Councillor Primes Exthale, the eldest member of the council and representative of the ancient ethereal collective, materialized first. His form was barely corporeal, existing as a shimmering pattern of light and thought that had transcended physical existence eons ago. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of millennia. "In 4,000 years of galactic civilization," he began, "we have never encountered anything that challenges our fundamental understanding of reality as profoundly as what we witness here today. The child sleeps peacefully beside a creature that has driven our greatest minds to madness. This is either the greatest miracle in recorded history, or the most terrifying threat we have ever faced." Director Quantum, the synthetic intelligence that governed the technology sector, added her calculated perspective. "Analysis of the energy patterns suggests that the human child is not simply unaffected by the Void Dragon's chaos field, she is actively neutralizing it. The quantum mechanics involved are beyond our current understanding of physics. We are essentially watching a localized rewriting of natural laws." General Craxton, now viewing the proceedings through military protocols, had reached conclusions that concerned him deeply. If humans possess this ability to neutralize psychic threats through simple proximity, every defensive strategy in the galaxy becomes obsolete overnight. Our entire military doctrine is built around containing chaos entities like the Void Dragon. What happens when an enemy can simply walk up to our most dangerous weapons and turn them into pets? High Priestess Yelana's theological concerns added another layer of complexity. The sacred prophecies speak of a species that will bridge the gap between order and chaos, bringing harmony to the cosmic balance. But they also warn that such power, in the wrong hands, could unravel the very fabric of existence. How do we determine which prophecy we are witnessing? Dr. Hexala had spent the last hour analyzing every scrap of data from the encounter, and her findings were revolutionary. "Colleagues, I believe we need to fundamentally reconsider our understanding of human psychology and capabilities. The child is not simply fearless, she is operating on cognitive frameworks that allow her to perceive the Void Dragon as a potential friend rather than an inevitable threat. This suggests that human consciousness may function differently from any species we have previously encountered." The debate continued as night fell over the arena, but Emma and the Void Dragon remained undisturbed. The creature had shifted positions several times to ensure the child remained comfortable, and the soft rumbling of its breathing created a lullaby that seemed to enhance her sleep rather than disturb it. Medical scanners confirmed that both beings were experiencing the deepest, most restful sleep patterns ever recorded. Ambassador Chen had remained in the arena throughout the emergency session, partly to monitor Emma's safety and partly because she understood the historic significance of the moment. When approached by Dr. Webb with his preliminary analysis, her response was measured but revealing. "Marcus, what you're seeing isn't unique to Emma," she said quietly. "It's not some special power or genetic mutation. This is simply how human children approach the world, with curiosity instead of fear, with trust instead of suspicion. We had to train ourselves out of these instincts to survive in a dangerous universe. But perhaps survival isn't the only consideration worth optimizing for." Webb's instruments detected elevated stress hormones in Chen's system, despite her calm demeanor. "Sarah, the implications of what you're suggesting, if this is a natural human trait that we've suppressed through socialization, then we might be capable of things we never imagined." Or, Chen replied, "we might be capable of things we forgot we could do. Our species has myths and legends about humans who could speak with monsters, who could tame the wildest beasts, who could bring peace to the most savage conflicts. We always assumed they were fairy tales." The conversation was interrupted by a shift in the void dragon's position. The creature was waking up, but its movements were careful and deliberate, designed not to disturb the sleeping child. Its great head turned toward the watching humans, and, for a moment, Chen found herself looking directly into eyes that burned with ancient intelligence. What she saw there was not the chaotic malevolence that reports had described, but something far more complex. There was gratitude, certainly, and a kind of wonder that mirrored Emma's own. But there was also a deep sadness, the accumulated weight of centuries spent alone and misunderstood. The void dragon was not a force of chaos, it was a being in pain, lashing out at a universe that had never tried to understand it. "My God," Chen whispered. "How long have you been trying to communicate? How long have you been waiting for someone to listen?" The dragon's response was not vocal but emotional, a pulse of feeling that somehow transmitted directly into Chen's consciousness. Images flashed through her mind, the first terrified explorers who had discovered the dragon's realm, the battles that had raged across star systems as fleets tried to contain it, the long centuries of imprisonment in facilities that grew ever more sophisticated but never more kind. And, through it all, the growing desperation of a mind that had been trying to say, "Please, I don't want to fight. Please, I just want to go home." Chen staggered under the weight of the communication, but forced herself to remain standing. This was perhaps the most important first contact in human history, and she refused to let fear override her responsibilities as an ambassador. "Where is home?" she asked aloud, not knowing if the creature could understand her words but hoping it could sense her intent. The response came as another flood of images, a region of space beyond the galaxy's edge, where reality functioned according to different rules. Stars that sang, planets that danced through dimensions, lifeforms that existed as pure emotion and thought. It was a realm of wonder and beauty that made the most advanced galactic civilizations seem primitive by comparison. And it was where the void dragon belonged, where it had been born, where its family still waited for its return. "You're not from our galaxy at all," Chen realized. "You're a refugee, stranded in our reality by accident or catastrophe. And we've been keeping you prisoner because we were too afraid to understand." The dragon's acknowledgement came with another wave of sadness. It had arrived in their reality during a cosmic event that had torn holes between dimensions, an accident that had trapped it far from everything it had ever known. Its apparent hostility had been panic, confusion, and desperate attempts to find a way home. But every species it encountered had attacked first and tried to understand later, if at all. Emma stirred in her sleep, and both Chen and the dragon immediately focused their attention on her. The child's subconscious seemed to sense the emotional conversation taking place around her, because she mumbled something in her sleep about helping lost friends find their way home. The simple innocence of the statement hit both adult beings like a physical blow. Chen realized that Emma had instinctively understood what trained diplomats and scientists had missed for centuries. The void dragon wasn't a threat to be contained, it was a lost soul who needed help finding its way home. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the arena's atmospheric shields, the emergency session reached its most critical phase. The implications of the night's revelations had spread throughout galactic civilization, and governments across known space were demanding answers to questions that had never been asked before. The theological ramifications alone could destabilize half the galaxy's religious systems, High Priestess Yelena reported to the Council. If our fundamental assumptions about good, evil, order, and chaos are incorrect, then 3,000 years of spiritual doctrine will need to be re-examined. Some faiths may not survive such a paradigm shift. But, even more concerning were the political implications. The hegemony of fear, a collection of species whose entire governmental structure was based on the controlled management of threats, was facing an existential crisis. If the galaxy's greatest threat could be neutralized by a child's compassion, what was the point of their massive military expenditures and fear-based social controls? Representatives from the fear hegemony are demanding immediate containment of both the human child and the Void Dragon, General Craxton reported with obvious distaste. They view this development as a direct threat to galactic stability. I'm afraid they may be planning unilateral action. Ambassador Zektai's compound eyes darkened with concern. The fear hegemony commanded significant military resources, and their tendency toward preemptive strikes was well documented. If they decided that humanity represented an unacceptable risk to the established order, they might act before the Council could intervene. How long before they can mobilize? He asked. Their nearest battle fleet is 6 hours away, Craxton replied. But, they also have sleeper agents embedded in various Council security forces. If they choose to act immediately. The conversation was interrupted by Emma's awakening. The child stirred against the Void Dragon's side, yawning and rubbing her eyes as morning sunlight warmed the arena. Her first instinct was to pat her massive companion gently, ensuring it was still there and still safe. "Good morning, Mr. Dragon," she said sleepily. "Did you sleep well?" "I had the most wonderful dreams about flying through the stars." The Void Dragon's response was a gentle rumble of contentment, and it carefully adjusted its position to help Emma sit up comfortably. The sight of the galaxy's most feared predator serving as a living alarm clock for a human child was still surreal enough to render the watching aliens speechless. Dr. Webb approached cautiously, his instruments detecting energy patterns that defied rational explanation. "Emma," he said gently, "we need to ask you some questions about your friend here. Can you tell us what it's like to talk with him?" Emma looked puzzled by the question. "Talk with him? We don't use words, silly. We use feelings. He's very sad because he misses his family, and he's been lost for a really long time. Don't you understand what he's saying?" The casual way she described psychic communication sent ripples of amazement through the scientific community. Emma wasn't displaying superhuman abilities, she was demonstrating perfectly natural human capacities that had apparently been forgotten or suppressed by adult civilization. "Emma," Ambassador Chen knelt beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "Can you ask your friend if he would like our help getting home to his family?" The child's face lit up with excitement. "Oh, yes. He would like that very much. He says his home is through the singing door, but he doesn't know how to open it. He's been trying for longer than numbers can count." The singing door description sent the Council's xenolinguists into overdrive. Cross-referencing with dimensional physics and ancient astronomical phenomena, they quickly identified what Emma was describing, a dimensional gateway that had been sealed for centuries, located in the unmapped regions beyond the galactic rim. Director Quantum's analysis confirmed their suspicions. The energy signature matches theoretical models for interdimensional barriers. However, opening such a gateway would require energy expenditures beyond our current technological capabilities. The power requirements are astronomical. But Dr. Hexala had been analyzing the quantum resonance patterns around Emma and the Void Dragon, and her findings suggested an alternative approach. "Colleagues, I believe the solution may be simpler than we imagine. The harmonic frequencies generated by the interaction between the child and the dragon are already affecting local spacetime. With proper amplification and focusing, their natural resonance might be sufficient to activate the gateway." The proposal was both elegant and terrifying. They were essentially suggesting that a human child and an ancient interdimensional being could, together, accomplish what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations could not achieve through technology alone. "The risks are enormous," General Craxton pointed out. "If the process goes wrong, we could destabilize reality itself across multiple star systems. The potential for catastrophic failure is outweighed by the potential for unprecedented breakthrough," Dr. Hexala interrupted. "We have an opportunity to establish communication with an interdimensional civilization, to learn about realms of existence beyond our current understanding, and to demonstrate that cooperation and compassion can achieve what force and fear cannot." Emma, oblivious to the cosmic significance of the adult conversation, was playing another simple game with the Void Dragon. This time she was teaching it a children's song from Earth, a simple melody about friendship and helping others. The dragon was learning quickly, its massive vocal cords creating harmonics that transformed the innocent tune into something that resonated through dimensions. As the melody reached its crescendo, something extraordinary happened. Reality itself seemed to shimmer around the pair, and, for a brief moment, the watching aliens caught glimpses of impossible vistas, the dragon's home dimension, with its singing stars and dancing planets, its creatures of pure thought and emotion. The vision lasted only seconds, but it was enough to convince even the most skeptical observers that Emma and the dragon were indeed capable of bridging the gap between realities. The implications were staggering. If humans could naturally interface with interdimensional beings, they represented not just a new member species for the Galactic Council, but a potential gateway to realms of existence that had been pure theory until now. The scientific, philosophical, and spiritual ramifications would reshape galactic civilization for millennia to come. But, first, they had to deal with the immediate crisis. The Fear Hegemony's fleet was approaching, and their intentions were becoming increasingly clear. They viewed the human-dragon partnership as an existential threat that needed to be eliminated before it could spread. The choice facing the Council was simple: support humanity's attempt to help the Void Dragon return home, or allow fear to once again triumph over understanding. The Fear Hegemony's battle fleet dropped out of hyperspace with the precision that marked their military excellence. 12 massive dreadnoughts arranged themselves in attack formation around the arena station, their weapon systems powered but not yet locked onto targets. The message was clear: they were prepared for war, but willing to negotiate first. Admiral Vexcorin materialized in the council chambers as a holographic projection, his cybernetic enhancements glinting menacingly in the artificial light. The hegemony had long ago embraced technological augmentation to overcome their species' natural fears, turning themselves into living weapons designed to face any threat without hesitation. "Honored Council," he began, his voice modulated through mechanical systems that stripped away any trace of uncertainty, "the Fear Hegemony cannot allow this contamination to spread beyond this system. The human child has demonstrated abilities that could undermine the fundamental order that has kept the galaxy stable for millennia. We demand immediate containment of both subjects for detailed study and potential neutralization." Ambassador Chen had anticipated this moment, but the sight of a dozen battle-ready dreadnoughts surrounding her daughter still sent ice through her veins. She forced herself to remain calm as she addressed the assembled dignitaries. "Admiral, with respect, what you're witnessing is not contamination but evolution. Humanity offers the galaxy something new, the ability to resolve conflicts through understanding rather than force. The Void Dragon has been a threat for 3 centuries not because it was inherently evil, but because no one ever tried to listen to it. Listening to chaos entities is how civilizations fall," Vexcorin replied coldly. "The fear protocols exist because they work. Contain the threat, study it under controlled conditions, eliminate it if necessary. These methods have protected galactic civilization for thousands of years." Emma, still playing with the Void Dragon in the arena below, was blissfully unaware of the military standoff developing around her. She had discovered that the dragon enjoyed simple magic tricks, and was currently making her teddy bear disappear behind her back only to produce it again with theatrical flourish. The dragon's delight was obvious, its great head bobbing with amusement at each reveal. Dr. Hexala had been monitoring the psychic resonance between child and dragon, and her latest findings added urgency to the diplomatic crisis. "Colleagues, the harmonic frequencies they're generating are approaching critical thresholds. If the process continues to intensify naturally, we may see spontaneous dimensional breakthrough within hours. The window for controlled action is closing rapidly." The statement sent shockwaves through both the council chambers and the hegemony command structure. A spontaneous dimensional breach could have consequences ranging from minor spatial anomalies to the complete unraveling of local spacetime. The risks of inaction were beginning to outweigh the risks of intervention. "This proves our point," Admiral Vexcorin declared. "The situation is spiraling beyond control. We must act immediately to prevent catastrophic dimensional instability." But Counselor Prime Zexthale raised one of his ethereal appendages for attention, his ancient voice carrying the weight of eons. "Admiral, your fear-based protocols have indeed maintained stability, but they have also prevented growth. For 4,000 years, galactic civilization has been locked in stagnation, too afraid of change to embrace genuine progress. Perhaps it is time to choose courage over caution." General Craxton found himself in an unexpected position, torn between his military instincts and his growing understanding of what they were witnessing. The tactical situation is unlike anything in our databases, he admitted. Traditional threat assessment protocols are inadequate for evaluating an entity that responds to kindness rather than force. Our entire strategic doctrine may need fundamental revision. The debate was interrupted by a new development in the arena. Emma had grown tired of magic tricks and was now asking the Void Dragon about its home, her natural curiosity leading her to questions that interdimensional physicists had spent lifetimes trying to answer. "What's it like where you come from, Mr. Dragon?" she asked, settling comfortably against its side. "Is it pretty? Do you have friends there?" The dragon's response came as a wave of imagery and emotion that was somehow transmitted to every psychically sensitive being in the area. They saw visions of impossible beauty, stars that danced through 10 dimensions simultaneously, planets where thoughts became reality and dreams took physical form, beings of pure energy who communicated through colors that had no names. But, more importantly, they felt the dragon's homesickness, its desperate longing to return to a realm where its nature was understood and accepted. The emotional impact was overwhelming, reducing several hardened military officers to tears and causing even Admiral Vexcorin's cybernetic systems to register unprecedented stress readings. "By all the forgotten gods," whispered High Priestess Yelena, her scales shifting through colors that represented religious awe. "We're not just looking at another dimension, we're looking at what our reality could become if we learn to embrace wonder instead of fear." The vision had an unexpected effect on the crisis. Many of the hegemony soldiers, experiencing genuine hope for the first time in their augmented lives, began questioning their orders. Their conditioning to eliminate threats was crumbling in the face of something that offered beauty rather than destruction, growth rather than stagnation. Admiral Vexcorin recognized the threat to his forces' cohesion and made a desperate decision. "All ships, prepare for immediate strike. Target the arena's lower levels. We'll contain the breach through controlled destruction of the source." But his order was never executed. Captain Thexnara, commander of the Hegemony flagship, had been monitoring the psychic transmissions from the dragon. Her own species had once possessed natural empathic abilities before the fear protocols had conditioned them out of the population. Now, experiencing those forgotten sensations for the first time in generations, she could not bring herself to destroy something so beautiful. "Admiral," she said quietly over the command channel, "I'm reading massive psychological benefits in my crew from exposure to these transmissions. Stress levels are dropping, creative thinking is increasing, and overall mental health markers are improving across the board. Sir, I believe what we're seeing may actually be therapeutic rather than threatening." The mutiny, when it came, was gentle but absolute. One by one, the hegemony ships powered down their weapons and turned their sensors toward peaceful observation rather than targeting. The crews who had spent lifetimes learning to fear everything new were discovering the joy of curiosity, the thrill of wonder, the peace that came from choosing trust over suspicion. "This is what we've been fighting against," Captain Thexnara continued, her voice filled with amazement. "This is what the fear protocols were designed to prevent. Not destruction or chaos, but the possibility that we might choose joy over survival, growth over safety, love over power." Ambassador Chen seized the moment to address the increasingly receptive audience. "This is humanity's gift to the galaxy, not our weapons, not our technology, not our strategic thinking, but our capacity to approach the unknown with open hearts. We don't see threats first and ask questions later. We see possibilities, opportunities, friends we haven't met yet." Emma, still unaware of the cosmic drama playing out around her, had begun singing another simple song. This one was about different creatures helping each other, about the lion befriending the mouse and the whale helping the dolphin. The Void Dragon joined in, its harmonies creating resonances that seemed to heal something fundamental in the fabric of reality itself. Dr. Webb's instruments were recording energy patterns that defied every known law of physics. "Sarah, the dimensional barriers are weakening in a controlled pattern. It's as if the universe itself is responding to their music, preparing to open a path home for our friend here." The implications were staggering. They weren't witnessing the breakdown of natural order, they were seeing the establishment of a new kind of order, one based on harmony rather than conflict, cooperation rather than domination, love rather than fear. "The gateway is forming," Director Quantum announced, her synthetic consciousness somehow touched by the emotional resonance of the moment. "Dimensional stability remains within acceptable parameters, but we're seeing the emergence of a stable wormhole connecting our reality to the dragon's home dimension." High above in the viewing galleries, 10,000 alien beings watched in wonder as reality itself began to reshape around a human child and her impossible friend. The gateway materialized slowly, like a flower blooming in reverse, its edges outlined in harmonies that could be seen as well as heard. Through its translucent surface, they caught glimpses of the dragon's home realm, a place of such beauty and peace that many observers wept simply from witnessing it. The void dragon rose to its feet, its massive head turning toward the growing portal with obvious recognition and joy. But it didn't immediately move toward freedom. Instead, it looked down at Emma with an expression of profound gratitude and what could only be called love. Emma sensed the farewell in her friend's demeanor and threw her small arms around as much of the dragon's neck as she could manage. "I'm going to miss you so much," she said, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "But I'm happy you get to go home to your family." The dragon's response was a gentle nuzzle that communicated more than words ever could. Then, with careful deliberation, it removed one of its smaller scales and placed it gently in Emma's hands. The scale shimmered with interdimensional energy, a link between realities that would ensure their friendship could continue across impossible distances. As the dragon began to move toward the portal, something unexpected happened. The gateway began to stabilize further, becoming more solid and permanent with each step the creature took toward it. What had started as a temporary dimensional breach was transforming into a stable bridge between worlds. "The connection is holding," Dr. Hexala reported in amazement. "The emotional resonance between the child and the dragon has created a permanent link between dimensions. We're looking at the galaxy's first interdimensional embassy." The void dragon paused at the threshold of the portal and turned back one final time. Its gaze swept across the assembled aliens, and in that look was both forgiveness for their past fear and hope for their future growth. Then, it spoke, not in words but in a final pulse of emotion that reached every conscious being in the system. The message was simple but profound: "Thank you for learning to listen. Thank you for choosing love over fear. Welcome to the larger universe." And, with that, the galaxy's most feared monster stepped through the portal and disappeared into the realm of singing stars, leaving behind a transformed civilization and a human child who had shown them all that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply the courage to care. 3 months after what galactic historians would later call the Day of Harmonic Convergence, the universe had indeed changed in ways both subtle and profound. The interdimensional gateway established by Emma and the Void Dragon remained stable, though access was carefully regulated by the newly formed Department of Interdimensional Relations. Emma Patterson had returned to Earth, but her impact on galactic civilization continued to ripple outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. The child herself seemed largely unaware of her cosmic significance, being far more interested in starting second grade and learning to play the violin than in her status as the galaxy's first interdimensional ambassador. Ambassador Chen stood in the observation deck of the new embassy station, built around the permanent portal that connected their dimension to the dragon's home realm. Through the shimmering gateway, she could see glimpses of impossible beauty, landscapes that defied physics, beings of pure thought and energy, and, yes, the void dragon itself, now reunited with its family and clearly thriving in its natural environment. "The integration process is proceeding better than we dared hope," Dr. Hexala reported as she joined Chen at the viewing window. The xenopsychologist had become the galaxy's leading expert on what they now called harmonic communication, the natural human ability to interface with alien psychologies through empathy rather than analysis. 67 species have requested permission to send children to the new training centers, she continued. They want their young to learn what Emma knew instinctively, how to approach the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. "The demand for human instructors is overwhelming." Chen nodded, watching as a group of young beings from various species played together in the station's Cultural Exchange Center. Human children, crystal and younglings, hegemony spawn who had been freed from their fear conditioning, and even a few ethereal wisps from Counselor Prime's dimension, all learning from each other, all discovering that differences were sources of wonder rather than reasons for conflict. The transformation of the fear hegemony had been perhaps the most dramatic change. Captain Thexnara, now Admiral Thexnara, had led a peaceful revolution that overthrew the old fear-based system and replaced it with what they called courage protocols, military doctrine based on protecting rather than conquering, understanding rather than destroying. The psychological rehabilitation programs are showing remarkable success, Dr. Webb reported, his enthusiasm undimmed by 3 months of non-stop research. Hegemony citizens who were exposed to the harmonic resonance are rediscovering emotional capacities they never knew they possessed. Depression rates have dropped by 90%, creative output has increased exponentially, and they're pioneering entirely new forms of art and music. the changes weren't limited to individual psychology. The economic implications of interdimensional contact were staggering, though not in the ways anyone had expected. Rather than exploiting the new realm for resources or technology, the galaxy had discovered something far more valuable: inspiration. Director Quantum had undergone perhaps the most unexpected transformation. The artificial intelligence that had once operated on pure logic now incorporated emotional subroutines inspired by Emma's natural empathy. Her new perspective had revolutionized everything from space navigation to conflict resolution. The interdimensional beings have agreed to share their knowledge, she announced during the monthly council session. Not their technology, which wouldn't function in our reality anyway, but their wisdom. They've offered to teach us how to perceive existence from perspectives we never imagined possible. The offer had come through the dragon itself, which had become something of a spokesman for its species. The creature that had once been seen as the galaxy's greatest threat was now its most valuable cultural bridge, facilitating understanding between realities that operated according to fundamentally different principles. Emma, visiting the station for the weekend with her parents, had no trouble communicating with her old friend through the portal. She would sit by the gateway for hours, sharing stories about her school adventures while the dragon told her about the wonders of its home dimension. Their conversations had become informal educational sessions, attended by xenolinguists and philosophers who were slowly learning to understand the nonverbal communication that seemed so natural to both child and dragon. Mr. Dragon says his people want to send a gift, Emma announced during one such session, her young voice carrying clearly through the station's corridors. They want to thank everyone for being so kind and for helping him get home. The gift, when it arrived, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't a physical object but, rather a song, a harmonic sequence that could be perceived by any species regardless of their sensory capabilities. The melody somehow conveyed the essence of joy, the mathematical beauty of compassion, the structural integrity of hope. When the song was first played through the station's communication systems, the effects were immediate and profound. Stress levels throughout the galaxy plummeted. Conflict resolution rates increased by orders of magnitude. Mental health indicators improved across all known species. Most remarkably, several species that had been on the verge of extinction due to despair and cultural decline began to recover and thrive. The theological implications had sent shock waves through every major religion in the galaxy. High Priestess Yelena had become the leader of a new interfaith movement that sought to reconcile ancient prophecies with modern revelations. Her central teaching was simple but revolutionary: the universe was not a battleground between good and evil, but a classroom where different forms of consciousness learned to appreciate each other's unique perspectives. The prophecies spoke of harmony between predator and prey, she explained to packed auditoriums across the galaxy. We interpreted this as the end of natural order. Instead, it was the beginning of supernatural order, existence elevated beyond the limitations of fear and survival to embrace growth and wonder. General Craxton had found new purpose in his military career, leading the development of protective intervention protocols that emphasized safeguarding rather than eliminating threats. His forces now specialized in creating safe spaces for first contact scenarios, ensuring that future encounters with unknown species would begin with Emma's approach rather than the galaxy's historical pattern of attack first, understand later. Military strength, he had come to understand, is most effectively demonstrated through the protection of the vulnerable, not the destruction of the threatening. The fear hegemony's transformation had created a power vacuum that was quickly filled by what became known as the Wonder Coalition, species that had embraced humanity's approach to the unknown. Their technology focused on exploration and communication rather than conquest and control, leading to breakthroughs in everything from faster-than-light travel to consciousness transfer. But, perhaps the most significant change was occurring at the individual level. Across the galaxy, beings who had spent lifetimes locked in fear-based thinking were discovering the joy of curiosity. Children who had been raised to see differences as threats were learning to see them as opportunities for friendship. Adults who had been conditioned to respond to challenges with violence were experimenting with compassion as a problem-solving tool. The process wasn't without its difficulties. Fear-based systems don't disappear overnight, and there were still species and governments that viewed humanity's influence as dangerous contamination. Several fringe groups had formed specifically to resist what they called the emotional plague, insisting that traditional military solutions were the only reliable protection against cosmic threats. These groups had tried several times to close the interdimensional gateway by force, but their efforts had been thwarted not by military intervention but by an unexpected alliance. Former enemies throughout the galaxy had united to protect what Emma and the dragon had created, forming volunteer protective circles around Embassy Station and other sites where harmonic communication was being taught. What we're witnessing, Ambassador Chen reflected as she prepared her monthly report to Earth, is not just first contact with another dimension, but first contact with our own potential. Emma didn't teach the galaxy anything new, she reminded us of capacities we all possessed but had forgotten how to use. The interdimensional beings had confirmed this analysis. Through their communications with the dragon, they explained that consciousness itself was the true universal constant. Every species, regardless of their physical form or dimensional origin, shared the fundamental capacity for empathy, wonder, and growth. The challenge was learning to access these abilities despite evolutionary programming that prioritized survival over understanding. Emma's natural approach to the Void Dragon hadn't been specifically human, it had been universally conscious. Her lack of fear-based conditioning had allowed her to access the common ground that existed between all thinking beings. What appeared to be a uniquely human gift was actually a reminder of what all species could achieve if they chose courage over caution. The dragon itself had become something of a celebrity in its home dimension, though celebrity wasn't quite the right concept for beings who experienced individual identity differently than their interdimensional neighbors. Its successful communication with Emma had opened new possibilities for contact between realities, leading to cultural exchange programs that were enriching consciousness across multiple dimensions. The barriers between realms, the dragon had explained through Emma's translation, were never meant to be permanent. They exist to allow different forms of consciousness to develop in isolation before they're ready for integration. When species learn to communicate through harmony rather than conflict, the barriers naturally begin to dissolve. This revelation had implications that stretched far beyond the current situation. If consciousness was indeed universal, and if dimensional barriers were temporary evolutionary aids, then the galaxy was potentially on the threshold of joining a truly cosmic civilization that spanned multiple realities. Dr. Hexala had calculated that at current rates of psychological evolution, most major galactic species would achieve harmonic consciousness within a few generations. The process could be accelerated through education and cultural exchange, but it couldn't be forced. Like Emma's natural empathy, harmonic consciousness had to emerge from genuine understanding rather than imposed conditioning. We're not just changing how we relate to other species, she had concluded in her latest research paper. We're evolving into beings capable of perceiving existence from perspectives that transcend our current limitations. Emma didn't just save the Void Dragon, she showed us the first steps toward becoming truly cosmic citizens. As the seasons changed and the first anniversary of the convergence approached, planning began for a galaxy-wide celebration. Not a commemoration of humanity's achievement, but a recognition of what all species could accomplish when they chose to see possibilities rather than threats in the face of the unknown. Emma herself was looking forward to the celebration, though for typically childlike reasons. She was excited about the interdimensional music performances that were being planned, curious about the new friends she would meet from species she'd never encountered, and hopeful that the dragon might be able to visit their reality for a brief reunion. Her parents watched her excitement with a mixture of pride and amazement. Their daughter had changed the course of galactic history, but, to her, she had simply helped a lost friend find its way home. Her perspective remained grounded in the simple truths that had made the miracle possible. Kindness was stronger than fear, curiosity was more powerful than suspicion, and love really could overcome anything if you had the courage to try. The universe had learned to listen to the song of harmonic consciousness, and the melody was just beginning.